Happy Women's History Month. I'm glad you're here, I'm glad I'm here. Let's get to it. Today, I thought I'd talk about the first woman to run for president in the United States, Victoria Woodhull. While Hillary Clinton was the first woman to run with the backing of a major party, she was not the first woman to run at all. Not by a long shot, actually. It's fascinating. I'll link you to the Wikipedia article that has a list of all the women to run ever. But for today, Victoria Woodhull. What a woman. Victoria Woodhull was a fascinating woman who led a life that, if I didn't know any better, I would think was a melodramatic movie script. But no, it's just her life. Grab a cup of tea. This is going to be a long one. We begin in 1838 in Ohio. Victoria Claflin was one of 10 children. Her mother was illiterate and her father was a petty criminal. She attended school only from the ages of 8 to 11, and she was married when she was 15. She divorced her first husband, Canning Woodhull, who was known to be an adulterer and an addict, after the birth of her children when she was just about 17. Her son was severely developmentally disabled, and that will become important to know later. From then on, she was known as Victoria Woodhull regardless of her marriages. We'll get to that later. As teenagers, Victoria and her youngest sister, Tennessee, worked as traveling clairvoyants and faith healers under their father's management during the spirituality fad of the late 19th century. Their father was also rumored to be abusive toward Victoria, but that point is contentious among biographers. After this, she and her sister moved to New York and worked for Cornelius Vanderbilt, the same one you learned about in 8th grade history. He apparently didn't trust doctors and so hired them to be medical clairvoyants. Tennessee may have also been sleeping with him, it's unclear. Regardless, they used the tips he gave them to start their Wall Street firm in 1870. They were the first women to own a Wall Street brokerage, but they still weren't allowed seats on the New York Stock Exchange. Women weren't allowed that until 1967, almost 100 years later. They were good at stock trading, too. They advised Cornelius Vanderbilt and other wealthy clients and made them millions. Newspapers at the time called them bewitching brokers and queens of finance. Not every publication liked them, though. Some contemporary men's magazines in particular criticized them, and even though neither Victoria nor Tennessee was involved in the day-to-day functioning of the brokerage firm, these magazines published images, presumably cartoons, showing them running the firm in sexualized ways. These magazines were chafing against the idea of women in public life, which they linked to sexual immorality and prostitution. Because a woman couldn't possibly just want to be in charge of her own life and business, right? At the same time, the sisters also founded a newspaper, Woodhull and Claflin's Weekly, which ran for 6 years from 1870 to 1876. Through the newspaper press, they published the first English translation of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. In 1871, Victoria Woodhull became the first woman to testify before a congressional committee. She testified before the House Judiciary Committee on the subject of women's suffrage, stating, quote, "The citizen who is taxed should also have a voice on the subject matter of taxation." Nice choice calling on revolutionary rhetoric, V. All of this was before she ran for president. You can see why I said her life is like a melodramatic movie script, right? Well, we've finally reached her presidential race. Victoria Woodhull ran for president in 1872, representing the Equal Rights Party. The party held a convention and, of course, appointed her its nominee. She also wanted Frederick Douglass to be her running mate, but he never publicly acknowledged her appointment of him, and in fact campaigned for her opponent, Ulysses S. Grant. Victoria ran on a platform of women's suffrage, regulation of monopolies, nationalization of railroads, an 8-hour workday, direct taxation, repealing the death penalty, and welfare for the poor. Though it was not a part of her platform, I feel like this is the right juncture to tell you that Victoria Woodhull was also an advocate of free love, which she defined as loving and marrying, or choosing not to marry, whoever you wanted, regardless of age, race, or religion. To directly quote her, it was, "An inalienable constitutional and natural right to love whom I may, to love as long or as short a period as I can, to change that love every day if I please." She was also an advocate of women's bodily autonomy and freedom to escape bad marriages, sex education in schools, and legalizing sex work. While she campaigned for the presidency, Victoria Woodhull did not receive even one electoral vote. Though votes for her do not appear to have been counted at the time, a Texas man later admitted to voting for her as a way to vote against Grant. So we know she received at least one vote. Not her own, though. Victoria Woodhull couldn't vote for herself, both because women didn't have the right to vote until the 20th century, and because she had been arrested. Shortly before the election, she, her sister Tennessee, and her then husband, Colonel James Blood, were arrested on charges of distributing obscene materials through the mail, after her newspaper published an article purporting that Henry Ward Beecher was an adulterer. You might know his name from a history class. He was a pretty well-known Protestant minister, and he had a very famous sister. His sister was Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, and she called Victoria Woodhull a vile jailbird and an impudent witch. Their other sister, Isabella, by the way, publicly supported Victoria. I won't go into whether or not Henry Ward Beecher was an adulterer. That's a subject for a whole other discussion. Victoria Woodhull was released from jail and was not convicted. Needless to say, Victoria Woodhull did not become the first female president of the United States. She ran again 2 more times in 1884 and 1892, respectively, and didn't win either of those times either, obviously. After her presidential run, Victoria Woodhull continued to run her newspaper until 1876. That was also the year that she divorced Blood, and shortly into 1877, her friend and benefactor Cornelius Vanderbilt died. His son gave her and Tennessee money to begin a new life, and probably to keep them from getting involved in the court battle over the rest of Cornelius's money. Victoria and Tennessee took the money and moved to England. There, she gave lectures and married a man named John Biddulph Martin. He lived until 1901, and after his death, Victoria lived out her life as a wealthy widow and was one of the first women in England to own a car. She died in 1927 at age 88, just a few months before her birthday. Through her career, Victoria Woodhull was criticized by others, often men. Political cartoonist Thomas Nast called her, quote, Mrs. Satan, and other newspapers called her a witch and a harpy. That's right, ladies, women have been putting up with the same bull for 150 years at least. Can men ever come up with a creative insult for a woman? Because history is complex and no one, and I stress this, no one, is without their flaws, there is a point where Victoria Woodhull becomes sticky and frankly wrong. While she was a proponent of free love and sex education in schools, Victoria Woodhull was also anti-abortion, stating, quote, every woman knows that if she were free, she would never bear an unwished-for child, nor think of murdering one before its birth. Late in life, she also became an advocate of eugenics and the sterilization of those she deemed unfit to breed. Some biographers attribute this to her son's developmental disability, but I don't want to excuse it. I think we can all agree Victoria Woodhull led a fascinating and unconventional life. Thanks for watching, I'll see you soon. Let's try to do some good. Bye!